Salut YouTube and welcome back to the Not Even French channel. Today's video is about the worst experiences that I had during my 6 years in France. And this video is not here to be depressing or a downer, but I think a lot of the whole I live in Paris, I live in France content that gets created is very much the highlight reel. Normal, right? We're all curating our lives and our highlight reels on Instagram and whatnot. But I thought by sharing just some of the real stuff that happened and some of the pretty negative experiences I guess that I've had could provide you some insight into, life and stuff still happening while you're overseas, whether you're in Paris or not. And life is not all roses and expat life is not all roses. I did try to draw out the experiences that were very much anchored to living in France as opposed to life not just going well, so I'll be talking about those. Just a trigger warning, I will be covering sexual harassment themes in this video, so just FYI, that's going to be in there as well. And if you're looking for something a little bit more lighthearted to watch afterwards, definitely check out my embarrassing stories video where I give you an insight into the times that I put my foot in my mouth and just really humiliated myself in France as well. But yeah, this is really going to be more around just the times that were a little bit shit. Just before we jump into the video though, I did want to thank the wonderful team over at Blinkist. Blinkist is hands down one of my favorite apps. I'm seriously such a learning animal. I'm always trying to grow and develop and learn something new. And honestly, Blinkist is perfect for people like us who are really always wanting to grow and learn, but at the same time are very, very busy. Because what they do is they take over 3,000 non-fiction titles and they've condensed them into blinks. So either 15-minute bites that you can read or listen to like a podcast. It's honestly genius. These books cover all different topics. You've got health and diet, money, relationships, career, mental health, language learning, social media, like whatever you want to learn more about, you'll be able to find a non-fiction book title on Blinkist and consume the key learning points, the key insights as quickly as humanly possible. A couple of blinks that I recommend this month are The Joy of Missing Out. It's an amazing book which is based on, FOMO, the fear of missing out, and how we're always comparing ourselves and always wanting to do that thing and that thing and that thing for the fear of missing out. The Joy of Missing Out is all about simplifying your life and focusing on what really matters. So that's a really good one. And I also really enjoyed this month Design Your Work Life, which is all about designing a career that makes you feel happy and fulfilled, because it's essentially based on who you are as a person. And this is something I'm always learning more about as a career coach over at Badass Careers as well. So if you guys want to give Blinkist a whirl, definitely click the link in my description box down below. It's also flashing up here on the screen, because the first 100 people to do so are going to be able to get a 1-week free trial of Blinkist to try out the premium version of the app. Not only this, but if you do decide to sign on, you'll get 25% off the full membership as well. So happy learning, happy reading. I hope that you guys absolutely love it. And without further ado, let's jump into the video. Okay, so let's start with some sort of just general bad stuff that kind of happened to me in Paris. We'll start with the metro. And I'm gonna build my way up. There's gonna be some pretty serious stories in here. So let's just start with something relatively minor. So in the metro, there are often pickpockets. You've got to have your wits about you. So one day when I was traveling in the metro, you're sort of sitting in these little booths of 4 seats, and I was sort of sitting on the edge of one, and I had my handbag on my lap, and there was a young guy, sort of opposite to me but diagonally. And when the metro stopped and the doors opened, people were sort of getting out and leaving and that kind of stuff, and then you hear like the brrrr, and that's a signal that the doors are about to close. And this is all in like a split second, but in that moment, he gets up from his chair and he tries to snatch my handbag out of my lap and make a runner for it. But unbeknownst to him, the actual handle of the handbag, it was wrapped around my arm. So it just kind of tugged at my arm as he kind of tried to jet off, but he couldn't actually grab it. And their whole plan is in that split second, like that brrr, and the doors are about to close, they quickly get out so no one can catch them. And basically the tug created like resistance and he couldn't get it off me, and he just ended up running off without my bag. But I almost had my bag stolen, and I've seen it actually happen before my eyes. So that's like, just leaves you a little bit shook, you know? Okay, so moving on to the metro, more towards a more serious theme, which is around health. So some of my worst experiences. So I was actually hospitalized twice in France. The first time was because of a cyst. The second time was completely my fault. I was brand new to roller skating, and I attempted to do something that was just silly and cocky, and I ended up basically falling and rolling down some stairs, twisting and dislocating my kneecap completely, and simultaneously breaking my kneecap, like shattering it as well. Don't ask, I had this whole thing, I wanted to become a roller derby girl, like... Okay, these things could have happened anywhere, but I think what made them sort of one of my worst experiences while I was in France is, I think I just got really bad luck, but I had really poor bedside manner, like both at the hospital and with my knee. The first physio that I worked with, like they were so harsh. Like the nurses were not maternal with me at all. They were not warm and inviting and stuff. They were very sort of like almost strict and harsh and almost disciplined with me. Like while I was sort of screaming in pain sometimes while they were doing certain interventions, they'd be like, "Écoutez madame, ça suffit." You know, like really quite harsh with me. And I was just really shocked because in New Zealand, the nurses are so gentle and warm. Like I'm just speaking generally, right? Like anytime that you interact with them, they're very lovely. And I was speaking to Niels about it, and he's like, well, when you have so many people to look after, like you don't have time to be lovely like as much, like you've just got to like go and stuff. But I was like really quite shocked because it was very much like quite commands, you know, like get up on here, do this, like sort of very little empathy, to be honest. And I remember after dislocating my knee, I started going to the physio, and at this point they didn't realize that my kneecap had been fractured because the x-rays didn't show it up, because I guess it wasn't in the right place because it was like all the way dislocated around my leg. And she was like massaging it and stuff, and I was like, oh wow, that really hurts. And she was basically saying like, it shouldn't hurt that much, and almost like not believing me and stuff. And long story short, like I was in tears in some sessions, like it was aching and hurting so much. So eventually she was like, okay, get an x-ray, and it was like, oh, it's actually broken and like she needs surgery, because at that point they'd only put my kneecap back in place, they hadn't operated. But yeah, I actually needed a whole operation on my knee. I was on crutches for over 4 months. Like it was quite a big deal, but I'll never forget the experience. Now, like I'm not saying all health professionals are like this, because the physio I had after my operation was an absolute angel. She was literally like, I think you've been traumatized by this experience, we're gonna go really slow. Like she was just so lovely. To be fair, she was Spanish. But yeah, I found that quite cold and confronting. And I remember very much feeling sort of like not believed in terms of my level of pain, or very much like, you know, it was sort of like I was a hassle if I don't know, asked for anything or anything like that. And yeah, again, like I don't know if this is normal, generalized, this is just my experience that happened to me. And it may also be because I am a foreigner, and when they hear the accents, sometimes like the level of service goes down, 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 especially if you're like at La Poste or at Le Préfecture to get your visa or anything like that. So I'm not sure, but that's what happened to me. Speaking of La Poste, interacting with La Poste and dealing with them was definitely one of the most negative experiences that I had while I was living in France. It sounds so ridiculous because it's just a postal service, but I had packages worth hundreds of dollars, you know, from several friends and family members, so adding up to in the thousands, that just never arrived. There's a very poor perception of La Poste, a lot of sort of perceived corruption, and it's very normal for a lot of things to go missing. There are a lot of accusations there that, you know, things do get stolen. And so that was quite a negative part of living in France. And I've just got many stories I could tell where the office was closing in, you know, 15-20 minutes, and they wouldn't take my parcel to send because they were closing and stuff like that. It was just dealing with them. Another genre of crappy things that happened to me in France was definitely around like creepy men. I've talked about it on this channel before. there are some men in France that are just so thirsty. There's the staring, there's the comments, there's the asking for your number, but not even in a joking way, in quite like a like gross way. You know, there's that whole thing. I think in terms of worst experiences, one, getting flashed a whole penis, which was gross, at the fountain near Pigalle. So I was just like, I lived in Pigalle in the 9th arrondissement. I was walking up past the fountain. There's a whole group of guys, and one of them thought it would be hilarious to pull his pants down and show me his dick. Friends have been flashed on trains, on the metro, I don't know, dark streets in Paris at night. Like, no, it doesn't even have to be at night, to be honest. Like, flashing does and has happened, which is just awful, to be honest, because it's like so disgusting and confrontational and quite frightening. And you're just like, but you also just don't want to see that. You're just like, no. I also had a few moments where I was quite scared walking home from work, because just in the little building that I worked for L'Oreal wasn't in the city, it was in a suburb, and you know, sort of later at night it was down a little side street. It happened maybe 2 or 3 times, like a man follow me really closely, asking me lots of questions, asking me for my number, and if I'd say no or not talk back, like getting quite sort of aggressive and saying like, why aren't you speaking to me? Why aren't you answering me? Are you too good? And like all that kind of stuff. Like, I had that happen, but the worst of all would have been my experience in the metro. I've talked about it once briefly on this channel, but essentially I was taking the metro and there was just this professional looking man. I'll never forget him. He had a trench coat, he had a briefcase, he had a hat on. He looked very sort of, you know, standard male in his 50s going to work. And like, this is so gross, but this happens sometimes in the metro in Paris. If it's very, very close and you're tightly packed in, you can feel like a man's getting excited or like pushing himself into you and stuff like that. Plenty of my friends have unfortunately had that and felt that sensation. This wasn't like that. This was the guy, actually. Like, I was wearing like a stockings and a short black skirt, and this guy actually slipped his hand up under my skirt and grabbed me, Donald Trump styles. And yeah, I was just like, I looked at him and he like looked down at me, and I was just like in so much shock and so much anger. I couldn't speak, I couldn't formulate anything, but I just looked at him like, you are disgusting, like you are the scum of the earth. Like, I just looked at him with these eyes that were just like, you're sick. And he got off at the doors opened and he got off the metro, and I was just really shook, and like, I don't know what to do. It's always really hard because everyone's like, oh, speak to the people, speak to the police and stuff, but I was so shook. I couldn't even remember what his face looked like. So I was like, what will I say? Like, a 50-year-old man with a trench coat and a hat, you know, at peak hour in Paris. Like, how are they gonna find him? Yeah, I don't know. I sort of panicked and I didn't do anything about it. And it's quite sad, but just like in London, you know, in Paris, there are quite a few campaigns around trying to get on top of these awful things that can happen in the metro, for sure. Another terrible experience that happened while I was living in Paris were the terrorist attacks that happened in November 2015. In these attacks, 129 people were killed immediately and over 300 needed urgent care. So they were very, very serious, and they really shook the city. And while I'm not going to sit here and claim that I was the most affected or traumatized in any way by these attacks, because I didn't know anyone, and it really fundamentally changed the way I see the world. It was scary. It was, you know, the level of security amped up, like going to museums, going to work, going anywhere, like getting your bags checked, getting scanned and stuff. And I started to constantly imagine these scenarios every single time I took the metro. I was like, how am I going to escape from here? If a bomb goes off, where am I going to go? If I hear someone getting stabbed, where will I run? Like, you start imagining these like worst case scenarios, and it's freaky, you know? And I'll just say that while people lived that so much harder and were in so much more pain than I was in that moment, it was a really harsh experience for me, and just the way it affected, I guess, my trust in the world. It was freaking sad and very scary. Now on the work front, overall, had incredible experiences, worked for incredible companies, French companies, Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy Group, L'Oreal, like I cannot complain. Just experiences full of growth and opportunity, and really built up my career in France. So there were loads of positives there. But I will say that I had like quite an uncomfortable and awkward experience. So I actually signed a holy grail CDE, a permanent contract, which are very hard to come by in France, like straight off the bat, unless you've sort of like done an internship, an apprenticeship, or, you know, you do your fixed term contract and then you finally get offered one that's, you know, they don't give them out easily because it's very, very difficult to, almost impossible to fire, restructure employees, very, very difficult and costly for companies. So they don't give them out easily. And I was actually offered one in leadership development consulting. So it was basically my dream job on paper. And I don't talk about it that much because I wasn't there for very long. So as part of this permanent contract, I had a 6-month trial period, 4-month trial periods, and then extended. You know, it's very, very common. And basically what was sort of sold to me on paper versus what I was doing was completely different. At this point, I had my master's degree, almost 5 years experience in HR, and I was basically just translating PowerPoints from French to English all day. And whenever I asked to, you know, hop on a project or have a bit of stretch or anything, it was always like, well, you'll be able to do that when you're a, you know, senior consultant. I'm like, okay, cool. So how long is that going to take? And the answer was basically 3 to 5 years. And I was basically like, I can't wait that long to use my brain, essentially. And at that time I was still interviewing, I was having conversations with L'Oreal, and when they offered me my role at L'Oreal, which had a budget of over 200,000 euros and room to play and do incredible things and work on incredible projects and all this kind of stuff, I had to jump ship. So I actually and it was in the final week, it took so long for everything to come together. So they actually offered me a permanent contract. They said, yeah, you've passed your trial period, like we want you. And I sort of pushed it out, and I ended up rejecting them and jumping to L'Oreal. And I don't regret it, but it felt like a really crappy thing to do and really ungrateful and just incredibly awkward. That was just one of my worst experiences. And while I didn't burn any bridges, I definitely didn't make any best friends. So yeah, that was quite a bad one. Alrighty guys, I hope that you found the story time interesting, and yeah, just a different angle of some of the things that happened while I was living over in France. If you have any questions whatsoever about the stories I've told today or anything else about life in France, don't hesitate to ask me, of course, in the comment section down below. And if you have any requests for the kinds of videos you'd like me to do, whatever that is, you know, I'm an open book, so I'm happy to share whatever that looks like. And otherwise, thank you guys so much for sticking around, and I'll see you next time on the Not Even French channel. A bientôt!